introduce McNeese President, Dr. Darrell Burkell.
Welcome to the McNeese State University campus. Tonight's panel discussion is presented by McNeese and the City of Lake Charles. It will explore the impact of World War II on Southwest Louisiana through first-hand accounts of what it was like to live during this period of world history and the impact the war had around the region. Everyone in Louisiana was touched by the war. Many of our citizens served in the military either stateside, in the Pacific, or on the battlefields. At home, families sacrificed to buy war bonds. They endured rationing of consumer goods, and many also experienced the greatest sacrifice, the loss of loved ones. I want to welcome our panelists and thank them for being here, Ms. Mary Ann Monk, Mr. Noah Lewis, Mr. Mike Jones, Mr. Bob Davidson, and our moderator, Mr. John Bridges. Tonight's event is in conjunction with the Pelican State Goes to War, an exhibit that is on view at the historic City Hall Arts and Cultural Center through October 19th. If you've not had the opportunity to visit this outstanding collection of memorabilia, photographs, and artifacts that highlight Louisiana's contribution to World War II, I encourage you to take the time to see it. Thank you, Mayor Nick Hunter, for your efforts to bring us this exhibit produced by the World War II Museum in New Orleans, Southwest Louisiana. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Mayor Nick Hunter.
Thank you, Dr. Burkell, and good evening to everyone. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's panel discussion on World War II's impact on Southwest Louisiana. Thank you to our moderator and panelists. Thank you to McNeese for partnering with us on this historic event, and a special thanks to all of you who are in attendance this evening. Specifically, I know we do have some members of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission with us tonight. President Charles Dalglish is with us this evening, and any members of the Mayor's Armed Forces Commission, would you please stand or raise your hand and be recognized at this moment? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in early August, the city opened an exhibit titled "The Pelican State Goes to War, Louisiana in World War II." This exhibit is on loan from the National World War II Museum, and we are so proud to bring it here to Lake Charles in Southwest Louisiana. We're even more proud to be able to offer citizens and guests the opportunity to view this exhibit absolutely free of charge. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank our sponsors who helped make this exhibit and the corresponding events such as this possible. At this time, I'd like to thank Citgo, Hunter and Saulnier in memory of Judge Edwin F. Hunter, and American Press. Thank you to our sponsors. Also, thank you to Stein Lumber, who sponsored a wall of honor featuring the photographs of local veterans who served in the war. The wall is sponsored in honor of J.W. Stein. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had a chance to visit the exhibit at 1911 Historic City Hall, you absolutely must make it. It is a memorable, historic, and inspiring exhibit. Now, the exhibit, the Wall of Honor, and a collection of locally submitted memorabilia are all on display at Historic City Hall, located in downtown Lake Charles at 1001 Bryan Street through October 19th. Tonight, in an effort to provide a local look into World War II's impact on Southwest Louisiana, specifically, you will learn more from our four different perspectives, often called the greatest generation. Veterans and those who remember this time firsthand are a part of living history, and it is vital that we capture their stories. Tonight, you are in for a real treat. We realize that there is not one experience or one definition of World War II, and this is why you see a very diverse panel representing a variety of demographics. You will hear from one local resident who was drafted into the United States Navy and served our country overseas from 1943 to 1945. You'll also hear from a Lake Charles native who was a teenager at Lake Charles High School during a time when her classmates were getting drafted to serve and scrap metal drives were taking place on the school's campus. Local historians will share details on how an entire community and industrial complex was built in support of the war effort. Southwest Louisiana played a vital role in supporting our nation during this pivotal time in our history. and we are looking forward to hearing what our panelists have to say. It has been my desire as mayor to enhance the cultural and academic scope of the city of Lake Charles, not through new city departments or more city employees, but through forging new and innovative partnerships. This event this evening is a tangible outcome of that desire, and we are thrilled to continue fostering new initiatives with McNeese State University and Sewella. I am inspired by the energy surrounding McNeese right now, and that is in no small part due to the leadership of Dr. Darrell Burkell. I'd like to honor Dr. Burkell one more time. Thank you. And so without further delay, at this time it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight, a trusted source for local news. John Bridges has been with KPLC TV since 1992. He has served as the co-host of 7 News Sunrise since 1996. John still helps wake up Southwest Louisiana to this day, and he's currently the executive producer of the program. He also produces the Louisiana Traveler and Hometown Hero segments each week for 7 News at 6. John has won several radio and television Associated Press News Awards and has been voted the most popular media personality by Lagniappe magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have John here with us tonight and serve as our moderator. John Bridges.
World War II has always fascinated me. I couldn't wait in history class to study World War II, and all the other things were boring to me. Sorry if it was Korean and Vietnam there, but World War II just to me held a fascination. I guess probably because my dad was a member of that greatest generation. So to hear that, for them to ask me to moderate this tonight, it's really got me excited and makes me want to stay up. I don't know how awake I'll be tomorrow morning at 4:30. I'm honored to be here with our panel, and I want to introduce you. You'll see this on your card here, but we have, first of all, Noah Lewis, Mr. Noah Lewis, 94 years old. He was born not far from where he lives right now, on North Franklin Street in Lake Charles, and was a World War II Navy, is a World War II Navy veteran. He was in the Seabees, and they built the war, basically. So we're going to hear his story in just a few minutes. We also have Mary Ann Monk with us tonight. Mary Ann is a Lake Charles native and was a student at Lake Charles High during World War II, and we'll talk about what that's like. We also have Mike Jones here, you know Mike from the American Press. He has written the, Mike, remind me again what? Our Past. I always call it 50 years ago today. But, I told Mike I'll read the front page, the obituaries, and his column in that order, in between the commercial breaks there. So Mike, good to have you with us. And he's going to give us a perspective on what was going on news-wise during the war. And then, of course, Bob Davidson is a Citgo retiree, but he grew up in Maplewood and also knows all about the history of City Surface Oil Company and how the war affected its construction. So thank you all for being here with us. We kind of have a format, but we're going to keep it loose this evening. I believe we've got cards being passed out, so if you have a question, we'll try to get to that when we can. But we're going to give each of our panelists about 5 to 10 minutes to talk about their story, and then we'll come back and revisit that and ask a couple of questions. How about that? All right. So first of all, let's go to Noah Lewis. And Mr. Lewis, you were in the Seabees during World War II, you told me, and that was from, what was it, 1943 to 45, right? Tell me about the Seabees, and what did y'all do?
Well, the Seabees, first of all, I was drafted, and really wanted to go to the Army, but I was told I had no choice. They sent me where they wanted to.
Gotcha.
So I wound up in the Seabees. I didn't really like the uniforms the Seabees. Those pants or something else. I really found out though why they had the bell bottom, because you had to pull them up so that you get down on your knees and scrub your dick.
I wondered what that was.
The bell bottom was that. But I was drafted and spent 8 years in Pearl Harbor. and the rest of the time I spent at home until the war was over. We at the CVs were builders of bridges, runways for the airplanes, Quonset huts. In other words, we were a construction battalion, more or less. It was called the 16th Special.
And I understand that in Guam, a little bitty island, is that the Marianas or it's
Marianas.
Yeah, but Guam is a little bitty island, but very important to the United States. We lost control of that to the Japanese and then reclaimed it, and that's when you came on to
That's when I came
Guam.
on, yes.
Once you were there, what was your duty? Y'all were given a special assignment, from what I understand, right?
Yeah, our assignment was to construct Quonset huts, barracks, and build roads and bridges. We were to the Navy what in the Army you had the engineers. We built, if they wanted it built, we built it.
They needed you to extend the runway out there too, didn't they?
We had extended the runway that the B-29, the Enola Gay. It wasn't quite, it was 1,500 feet short. And we had to extend that runway. And I was a heavy equipment operator, operated the crane, a bulldozer most of the time when we was building the roads and roadways.
I understand that you learned a trade. You learned several trades while you were in the CVs, the construction work, things like that. After the war, when you got back here to Southwest Louisiana to apply for a job, everybody was looking for a job, what happened?
Well, I tried to get a job as a heavy equipment operator, and I applied for that over the telephone. And when I arrived out there, I was interviewed and was told that they didn't have a job for a heavy equipment operator, but they did have a job for a janitor. So I took the job as a janitor. And I worked my way from a janitor to a bottle washer to a sample collector and eventually an analyst. And I retired from PPG as an analyst.
All right, that's great. Now, I'm close to Mr. Lewis's story because my dad worked at PPG in the same lab that he did. And I didn't find this out until we met, and that was very special to me. What was your impression when you tried to use the skills that you learned? Well, let's first of all talk about it. In the CVs, you felt equal to the rest of the soldiers, more or less, right?
Oh, we were equal. But when I got back here, we weren't equal anymore because of the race. I could not operate a heavy equipment operator because I was not white. That job was only for white, of course. And being black, you were a laborer no matter what was being done. That's your right.
Mr. Lewis, what did that say to you when you were fighting for a country, for freedom, and then you came back to your home country and you weren't free?
Well, it's a hurting thing, but you learn to suck it up and go ahead and do what you got to do. And I learned to deal with it. And I found out that people are people. What makes you cry, makes me cry. What makes you laugh, makes me laugh. And that was it while we was in the service. We were all the same. I didn't know that until I went into the service because I never had that kind of contact with white. So, because we always had what was considered our place. We came back and found the same thing. I thought it had changed, but it had not changed.
I hope we can all learn from your patience, your class, and what all you've gone through over the last couple of years. And from what I understand today from everybody that knows you, you're one class act, you're one hero in the community. Thank you. Okay, we'll get back to you. young. Marion, you were a teenager during World War II.
Yes, I was.
Lake Charles High School.
Lake Charles High.
Were you a Kilty?
Yes, I was. That was a great experience.
My understanding was you probably still have strong feet from being a Kilty with those legs. Tell me about what was life like during that time as a teenager.
Well, my classmates and I entered Lake Charles High in the fall of 1942. Most of us were 13-year-old freshmen, already jolted by the tragedy of Pearl Harbor into probably more sobering thoughts and a wider world outlook than the previous freshmen of a few years there. But there were so many things going on in our community, so many changes in our personal family lives, in our school and our community of Southwest Louisiana. First of all, rationing certainly affected us with the shortage of a number of food items and gasoline, and cars and tires were very hard to replace and keep up. Blackout shades were at our windows because of our location near the Gulf. And there were no night football games to look forward to because of that. The German submarines were quite active, not that far from our homes. So I guess one of the most frightening things to me was the sight of that gas mask that my dad brought home when he was in a civilian group that was in charge of looking after the compliance of the neighborhood for the blackout restrictions. And even today, when I went up to the museum, or this week when I went up to the museum, the sight of one of those just really shook me.
You'll always
It
remember.
brought it very much home. We had so many families where the father was absent, so I was fortunate to have my father at home at that time. But almost every family had members who were away in military service, some of whom, of course, never returned. At school, many of the boys were leaving as soon as they were of an age that they could volunteer or had gotten their parents' permission. The school authorities, of course, tried to encourage them to stay and graduate and to, or at least get GED, but many of them didn't. Our school superintendent and the principal and many of the teachers worked very hard at staying in touch with those students as far as they could, and to help them out when those came home. In town, we were able to meet many of the GIs when they came in from the nearby bases, training camps. And the Army Air Base out on East Broad Street, because there was no Air Force at that time. So we saw a lot of uniforms on the street. And soon there were things that we could do to help out to make what free time they had more pleasant, like some of the musical ensembles would entertain for them when they were.
And you were telling me that Lake Charles, or the 11th grade was as far as you went in school back then, huh?
We were just in high school from the 8th to the 11th.
We're going to get back with more stories about what it was like to live in Lake Charles. Dr. Harcourt Stebbins told me a story one time about he was doing a radio play at KPLC Radio at the Majestic Hotel on December 7th. And the bulletin came over the teletype. The kids went over there and ripped it off of the teletype and apparently delayed the announcement about 30 minutes over KPLC radio because they were excited about or scared about what they read over the teletype. And I'd never heard that story before. Yeah. Let's go to Mike Jones. Mike, of course, has been following the World War II in his 75 years ago today section of our past. And Mike, I noticed today you had an article about some injuries in Sulphur and some surrounding communities. The War Department reported that. Also, something about General, I almost said General George C. Scott, General Patton, what he did 75 years ago on this day. You've been following World War II in all of your comments.
Oh, yes, it's been fascinating following it day by day because you get more of a feeling of what people were going through at that time. And of course, the main impact of the war was on the people, on the families. From the very first day, Southwest Louisiana would start getting the bad news. We had 6 men alone who were killed at Pearl Harbor during Pearl Harbor attack on December 7th. I've got their names here. I'd like to read them out real quickly. See, killed in action were Easton Arledge of Benton. He was on the USS Arizona. Claude Arnold Jr. of Lake Charles was on the USS Arizona. William E. Stoddard of Benton was on the USS Arizona. Joseph D. Frenchy Connor of Creole was on the USS Utah. Harold Harbison of Lake Charles was on the USS Utah. And William Marvin Red Mayo of Lake Charles was on the USS Helena. And of course, that was just the beginning of it. And the people quickly learned the reaction of the local people to all this. I thought was very admirable too. The first thing they would do when some of these big events would happen would be having citywide prayer services, and the people would report to their churches for prayer. Let's see, a good example of that would be on June 6, 1944, when had been expecting the invasion of France all along, and so they had made prior plans. Of course, they didn't know when it would happen, for all the churches in Lake Charles to ring their bells, and that would be the signal for all the people to report to the churches for prayer. And of course, that happened on June 6, 1944. At 6:30 a.m. is when the landing in Normandy Beach started occurring, and the news to the public was released an hour later, about 7:30. And that was about 1:30 a.m. In Lake Charles. And by 2 o'clock that morning, the church bells of Immaculate Conception started ringing, and then the other churches followed with that. The whole families would come to church to pray. So I thought that was very impressive. And then, of course, it had a great impact on Lake Charles in many other ways as well. I guess some of the direct military type impacts were that they had the Lake Charles Air Base. It was established here prior to the war, just prior to the war in June of 1941, and it was the Lake Charles Army Flying School. And they trained the fighter pilots for the war. And the first class graduated in May of 1942.
And is that where Chenault is now?
Yes, yes. And then they had, it was, I think in May of 1942, they changed to training bomber pilots. And so I think just about the rest of the war they were training bomber pilots. And of course they were needed desperately and very quickly all over the world. And the bomber crews had to be constantly replaced. I think in Europe they generally flew about 30 missions, and then they were relieved from that duty. And so they had to keep cranking out these new bomber crews as quickly as they could. And of course, that was not the only, it wasn't just the people who in combat were being killed, it was also in training accidents. They had some bad training accidents around here. Worst one I've come across was a bomber that crashed over in Reeves and killing all 5 of the crewmen on it. So that was very dangerous type training.
That was the one that happened near the school, from what I understand. Didn't some of the students see that at the school, or was that another?
I'm not sure. They didn't go into much detail. That government had strict censorship at that time, so they didn't really give you too much detail.
Southwest Louisiana's economy changed during the war and afterwards, and Bob's going to kind of touch on that with city service and Citgo, but you noticed that too with war plants coming into the area and changed our economy tremendously.
Oh yeah, they had big announcements for the when the war plants were open, and they knew very well this was going to change Lake Charles forever and Southwest Louisiana forever. And even before the end of the war, they were planning for the post-war period, how they were going to transition to civilian products. But another part about the military was they established prisoner of war camps all over Southwest Louisiana. Lake Charles, Sulphur, Welsh, Jennings, Iowa, Bell City, Hayes, I think in Edgerly. They brought a total of 20,000 prisoners of war to Louisiana to be incarcerated in the state. And so from this area, most of them started out at Camp Pope, which is now Fort Pope. And then they farmed them out to the various other places that needed it. I mean, they had the crops. There were so many men that had been drafted into the service that they didn't have enough men to harvest the crops.
I think that fact surprises a lot of people, is that they didn't realize we had POW camps here.
Yeah, it was on Lake Charles, it was on Saturday Street, and in Sulphur, it was on the fairgrounds, and they did everything. They even had some here at McNeese doing yard work and that sort of thing. And it was somewhat of a scandal that how well the German prisoners were treated. And they were fed well, and they were even given some limited freedom, working out in the fields and so forth. But the one that amazed me the most was they even brought the German prisoners out to speak at the civic clubs. I found the Lions Club in Sulphur had the camp commandant in Sulphur came and spoke to the Lions Club, and he brought along 2 of the prisoners. And one of them was the one speaking. He was a sergeant. I think both of these fellows were from the Ramos Africa Corps. And the other one was the translator. And so...
knowing the Lions Club or Rotarians or Kiwanis, they were probably trying to get credit for attending.
But the Germans were very thankful for the nice way they were treated.
That's interesting.
They said, I don't think it was true, but they said the Americans being held in Germany were being treated well too, but I think we're not out that much.
Not the case.
Good. So,
Mike, I'm going to get back to you in just a few minutes, but let's get to Bob Davidson. And Bob, Citgo, City Service Oil Company, basically grew from the war in Lake Charles.
Right. They sure did, John. I was born in March of 1942, so you're probably wondering, what is that guy doing on the panel? I had no personal war experience, but my dad worked for city service at the Bossier City refinery up in North Louisiana. And shortly after I was born, he transferred down here with the company. And we moved to Maplewood, which was the town that city service built to house its workers. And I'd like to kind of go in briefly at the onset on why the refinery was built, what prompted all this. Of course, spring of 1942 and World War II was raging around the globe, and the food for World War II, if you will, was gasoline. And anybody who didn't have enough gasoline, they were going to pay the price. in World War II. So early in the war, the U.S. military chiefs decided that all airplane engines built would have to run on 100-octane gasoline. And there was a little problem there, though. All the refineries existing at the time could not furnish enough 100-octane aviation fuel to carry these fighters and bombers and support aircraft. They needed to fly higher, faster, farther. Their payloads were a lot heavier, so they needed the engines to run on 100-octane. So President Roosevelt called for 60,000 airplanes to be built in 1942, and everybody said, that's impossible. Well, in 1943, 86,000 airplanes were built and delivered for the war effort. And after turning down an offer that was made to city service to build a refinery, the federal government came back to them and said, look, go find you a site and build a refinery to manufacture 100-octane gasoline. That's needed. So a whole host of questions arose when that decision was made. Where would it be built? Why that location? Who would build it? Where would the workers live? We had a housing problem back then. How would they get to the job site? We had a transportation problem back then, just like we do now. Would the materials and supplies be forthcoming? Would there be expertise to build such a refinery? And could it be built in 2 years when it normally took 7 years to build a refinery like this? The logistics were just staggering, and I hope later in the program to get into some of those logistics.
I've always been fascinated by Maplewood too, because it was, it's where I live now, but it was built during the war, and it was a prototype subdivision designed by the same firm that built the Rockefeller Center, I believe. It had its own community theater, shopping center, things like that.
City within itself had its own fire department, police department.
Just for the workers at city service work.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very good. I want to give you a deadline. It's a little after 7, but let's give 5 more minutes if you want to submit a question. And Katie is there to pick them up if you have a question for our panel or comment or something like that. So first of all, what a great crowd tonight. I'm really impressed that we've got a good crowd here this evening. And I meant to ask, are there any World War II veterans with us this evening? If you would raise your hand. And all right. So let's give about 5 more minutes and you can submit your questions in for our panel. Let's get back to Mr. Lewis and let's talk about what you did in Guam and what life was like to be on that small island out in the middle of nowhere. Now, were you on board the ship most of the time, or did they have headquarters for you on the
No, we were headquarters on the mall. We had we built our own barrack, and we were stationed right on the mall, and we would work from there. Whatever they had to be done in the case of building roads or bridges, well, we did it, and we were there. You know.
You told me if it couldn't be done, you found a way to get it done.
Oh yeah, our motto was can do, whatever it is, we do it. All you had to do was tell us what you wanted. And we found a way to do it. We was a special battalion, it's called the 16th Special.
And what do you think you learned most from that discipline in the Seabees? Do you feel that had an influence on your life as you grew older?
Oh yeah, definitely, because, my children, they understood once I got them to see what I had been through and what life meant to us to get ahead. And I was fortunate to get all 3 of them through college. So they're doing a good job now.
That's good. I understand that when you would wear your lab coat home from work, folks in the area thought you were a doctor, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I told them that I was an analyst, they didn't believe
They
it.
didn't believe
They
you.
didn't believe it. No.
And did you meet your wife after you came back?
I met her after I came back.
And how long were y'all married?
66 years.
66 years. Congratulations. Very good. What was life like after the war back in Lake Charles? I know there were a lot of servicemen looking for employment.
It was pretty rough because it's rather hard to find the type of work that most of the fellows, when the Lake Charles Air Base opened up, that changed things. I think that was around 50 or 51. Because where I'm living now, there's quite a few white folks living there in North Lake Charles. But when I moved in that area, the white folks started moving to the south side. And that's why everything went that way. But when the air base came in, then they started building homes, and the soldiers were all mixed up there. That's Oak Park and all that area out there. They built a lot of homes, and the soldiers were there, so then everything began to get mixed up. And it worked out real well. It was a while, you know, but it worked out.
You told me too that you were active in your church.
Yeah.
Tell me which church?
Christian Baptist.
Christian Baptist. And did that start, tell me how important religion was to you when you were in the CBs and out there in the middle of nowhere?
It was very important because a lot of fellas didn't believe in God. But when the Japanese started coming out of those crevices and popping off one every night somebody was getting shot, almost. Then a lot of them turned to God, then they understood that there is a God, regardless of what anybody said. There is a God and He's real. All you have to do is put your faith in Him. You can do just about anything.
You credit him for those 94 years.
Oh yeah.
All right.
I guarantee.
Ms. Monk, you mentioned the gas mask fear, and did it keep you up at night, worried about being attacked, or the Germans coming up the Calcasieu Ship Channel? Or?
Well, I don't know exactly, but there was fear of chemical warfare. That you would need protection from if you had to be out of that.
Being a teenager, I guess you're worried about a lot of things anyway, but knowing that your neighbors and the boys that you went to school with were overseas probably had you quite concerned, Tom.
Oh, yes, very much so. And, but there were good things also, that changes that came in our school life, and as Mr. Lewis mentioned, our church participation meant probably more to us then than it might have otherwise. And it was quite interesting to see how the church attendance was at an all-time high, and how the servicemen who came in sometimes sang in the choir, and families often took servicemen home with them for Sunday dinner and a visit in the afternoon. And that was one of the ways that we just got to know people from so many more backgrounds than we would have otherwise. There were good things about it too. The faculty even changed. Prior to so many of the men leaving, there were no married women employed in city schools. And that changed. And gave us more experience. And it was kind of funny with the families moving in particularly from up north. We had a little difficulty adjusting to each other. We had to learn to listen faster, and they had to learn to talk slower.
Yeah, they had that accent, didn't they?
We had a particularly hard time understanding some from Vermont.
Sure, and I think that comes to play too in Maplewood. Boy, what a mix of characters there. Yeah, right. Mike, as you have gone along covering World War II in the 75 years ago section, what has stood out most in reading the American Press articles?
I guess just how much involved the people themselves were, just everybody was behind the war effort. For example, they had the scrap metal drives. They also had war bond drives, a series of them throughout the war, and they raised millions and millions of dollars just here locally. It just astounded me that, how generous people were being. In one particular case, one of the incentives, one of the bond drives, was you could pay a little bit extra and have them put a special message on a bond from you to Hitler or to Hirohito, and so that
If
was,
they raise money, that's what they do. Yeah.
and so that, I think it was just the unanimity of the people in the support for the war, in the support for the military. The soldiers at the air base and seemed to be treated very well, and families would take them in on holidays and things like that.
That's an interesting story to hear from Marion. Let's talk to Bob now about city service in Maplewood. To continue the story there, the plant was built in 2 years, which is amazing.
Yes.
And so they had fuel going up in 2 years.
Yes.
Going out.
And a big problem, they had 11,500 workers at their peak. Where do you house those people? And then where do you put your employees? And that prompted city service to build Maplewood. A little over 700 homes were built in Maplewood and rented only to city service employees.
It was only rent. They couldn't buy.
Right.
And they had to move across the street to Hollywood to build their homes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
I think in later years you could purchase your home.
Right.
The rent at the time reached a maximum of $66.50 a month. And for 2 or 3 days, the employees went on strike because they wanted a maximum of $35. So President Truman had the United States Army come down and take over the refinery. And the strike lasted about 2 days, 3 days. And everybody went back to work.
It was all okay.
That's it.
It was a community within itself. You had sidewalks, a movie theater, a shopping center,
Yes.
school was built. Even the churches were built,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The churches that are there now started from the Maplewood Housing Corporation.
Great place to grow up. I can't think of a better place to spend my childhood than Maplewood.
With bus rides to Lake Charles.
Fantastic.
Interesting to read. There's a Maplewood, if you grew up in Maplewood, Facebook page that you can check out there. All right, we have a couple of questions here. One's from Thomas McIntyre. He says, my grandfather, Thomas Joseph McIntyre, was a Marine on Guam. And he wants to know, Mr. Lewis, did you meet or interact with any Marines on Guam, and how so?
Yeah, we met several Marines. As a matter of fact, our chow hall was a place for a whole bunch of Marines to come eat because we had fresh food. The Marines, they had to do most of the bivouac, and what they call hardtack. So they would come over all the time to eat with us.
It's very possible that you might have eaten with his grandfather.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
Quite possible.
Now, you said real food, fresh food, I guess is what y'all ate in
Oh yeah,
Guam.
we had our own refrigeration and everything, so we could keep fresh food.
Yeah.
So we were pretty well fed. The Marines, they had to be out on the field all the time.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hard for them. We'd be glad to come over and eat at our chow hall.
bet so. Get a good hot meal. Keith DeSaulnier, retired Army. Hey, Dr. Keith. What or how did you communicate with family? What was it like to send or receive contact with family? Did you write letters back and forth, or Mr. Lewis?
We had what is called an email that we could write. We could only say so much because it would blot out most of the stuff. You know, it would be stricken because they would read your mail before it go out because they didn't know whether or not you would be saying something that the enemy would get.
Loose lips. Yeah.
But that's the way it was done.
And it was called email back then. Different type of email, but that's the way you got it through.
Right.
What was that like to wait weeks, months?
It took quite a while to get mail out there. I would say maybe a month or so to get mail.
Quite a bit of difference from today when I've already had 3 messages I can tell on my cell phone. Yeah, and when we have to wait 30 seconds to get a reply, so months sometimes. Mary, did y'all send mail to soldiers, or did?
Yes, and sometimes it went through well, and other times, as you can see from the display down at City Hall of letters there, sometimes poor fellows had to wait, seemed forever to get mail from home. But it was possible to communicate, and the email would,
Was that way of doing it? Yeah.
Yes.
Mike, did you see any talk of any of your news stories that you've seen in past American presses talking about correspondence and things like that?
Well, yeah, of course, they were, the families that were getting letters from people who were on the fighting fronts, they had some amazing stories to tell, and so there was quite a bit of that. You know, that was, of course, the only way they didn't have the internet and all the ways of communicating or did do now. So correspondence was the main way of keeping in touch.
You mentioned the ringing of the church bells and the increased attendance in church attendance, and also the scrap drives and just the general sense of patriotism. We sense this right after 9/11. And it's unfortunate, I guess, this is an editorial comment, but I think most people would agree that our patriotism swells whenever we're under duress or something's happened, but we tend to lose sight of that. Comment, let's hear each of y'all's comments on that.
Yeah, this was long-lasting. You know, I think it went far beyond the war even. Of course, I was born in 1949, and I can remember the 1950s pretty well. I think that was still a pretty great era for patriotism as well.
Yeah. And Bob, it just seems to lose, you know, we seem to lose our patriotism when we argue and fight over little things, and then all of a sudden something bad happens and we're all together again.
Anytime there's a conflict, the country comes together, just like Desert Storm. I know Dr. Stonier was in Desert Storm, and patriotism was at its height at that time, just like World War II.
It's unfortunate we can't do that during peacetime.
I totally agree. At our 50th anniversary for the refinery, we invited General Norman Schwarzkopf to be our guest for the day, and he was gracious enough to come down, and we had a big employee celebration. And it was fitting that the refinery was built for World War II, and here's General Schwarzkopf as our guest.
Mr. Lewis, you've seen many comings and goings of patriotism in the Lake Charles area. What are your comments on that?
Yeah. I really don't have any comments on it. Really, I can't comment on it. I think I don't have.
You served your time in the Seabees.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Are you? I know the Marines are once a Marine, always a Marine. Do you feel that way about Seabees?
Oh yeah. Definitely. As a matter of fact, the Marines were the one that did gave us our basic training. That was at Fort Hueneme in California, Oxnard, California. The Marines gave our basic training. Boot camp was in Magruder, Virginia, and they also had a camp in Gulfport, Mississippi.
So y'all had to go through the same training that
All had to go
all the
through
other
the same
military did.
The Marines are pretty tough people to deal with, I'll tell you.
How many Marines are out here? I saw a real chat there. Yeah. Any Marines? Sorry, good deal. Good. Mary Ann, you were talking about the football games in the afternoon. That was so that the lights wouldn't be on, right, at night? Yeah. What was that like?
Well, it was very hot if you were killed in.
In those wool uniforms. Yeah, not to mention that you wore
But
your
we were
feet
proud
out.
to wear
And
them.
walk fast.
And walk fast, yeah.
Right. And as far as out-of-town games, that was almost unheard of. I think we made one trip to Jennings and for a daytime game.
On the train, you told me,
And
right?
on a train car that must have been from some museum somewhere. Or in seats, but that was a big thrill to get to have our parade, you know. And,
Right.
but the sports were very limited, yeah.
And Mike, did they have whole lot of sports games back then? I mean, I don't know if you saw any sports coverage.
Yeah, they
but,
had quite a bit. Yeah, they had, even with the military bases, they had their sports teams. And, it was as much sports as ever, maybe more.
I guess with high school too, they were still in town, so that was one thing. The professional teams, we heard the rise of the women's baseball teams as well. Maplewood was settled, of course, by city service, and then as the homes were sold off, the community of Maplewood really kind of reinvented itself over the years.
Right, a lot of the homes were sold, a lot of them were moved. People would buy them and make camps out of them and move them somewhere. So now people have bought just property in Maplewood and built new homes there. So it's still a community.
It's interesting, some of the crepe myrtles that are in that neighborhood were first planted by the Maplewood Garden Club, I think in 1944 or something.
That's right.
Interesting. Again, if you have any more questions for our panel, be sure to submit those in. I think our deadline is passed on that. We've got about 6 more minutes to talk here this evening. And Ms. Lewis, if you had to think of one or two points that you wanted our audience to know about what life was like during World War II for you, what would you pass along to them? What nugget of information would you give us?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That would be my word on that. Because we are all, I would say, under the skin the same thing, the same purpose. The same thing exists regardless to the color of the skin. But that was the thing that kept most of us apart. I had no idea that when I went into the service that I would be able to work side by side with a white man and do the same job he did, and everything would be equal and there would be no animosity. And that I learned when I was over there on Guam, that they had my back, I had their back. So we all got along beautifully. It would be wonderful if the whole country could be like that.
Amen. I want to thank you for sharing your story with us this evening and for also sharing your story with me for the hometown hero of KPLC. And you can go to KPLCTV.com. You can see Mr. Lewis's story this week. And class act. Thanks so much for inviting me to your home. I appreciate that. Mary Ann, what if you would leave with us a nugget of information, or what would you want us to remember about that era of living during World War II?
I think to remember that no matter how bad things seem to be, if you're patient and have faith, you'll find that something good can come out of it. And I think we experienced that here in our community. Some things take a long time to change, but eventually they can change. And also to remember that there may be opportunities that you never dreamed of. I was going to mention that so many people learn new skills that they could put into their plans from after the war and what they wanted to do in life. And many people got an education through the GI Bill of Rights. And so that made a big difference
Some positives.
in their future.
Very good. Mike, what about you?
Well, I guess what strikes me is the most is what a frightening time it was, because as you were living it, you didn't really know how it was going to come out, and it was there's so many dangers and so many things that could have gone wrong, and also the heroism of both the populace in general, as well as the soldiers and sailors and airmen. As they began coming home on leave after serving in combat, they brought back some just amazing stories that astounded me, and it was incredible, the heroism and just how frightening the times was.
Bob, our industrial complex has, I don't know, size-wise, how you would say how much it's grown over the years, but this really got Southwest Louisiana started on that plane.
Correct, and that's the thing that sticks in my mind, is here was a company that built a refinery to manufacture wartime products, and when the war is over, they continued to manufacture aviation fuels, motor fuels, petrochemicals. They started out at 70,000 barrels per calendar day. They're now at 425,000 barrels per calendar day. The American spirit and work ethic and ingenuity is unbelievable at times like this.
Very good. Thank you, panelists, for all being here with us this evening. Let's hear it. Again, don't forget about the exhibit that is at Historic City Hall. It'll be there until October 19th. And you can go to the City of Lake Charles website to get the times to check it out. I admit that I have not been by, but I promise I am going by before October 19th. It's fascinating. And I know if you haven't been to the World War II Museum in New Orleans, you need to make that a trip for sure. But this exhibit in Lake Charles is something that won't be around forever, and we're not sure if it'll ever come back to Lake Charles. So you want to get it now while you can at Historic City Hall. If that's it, we'll go ahead and dismiss. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.